Now that we're entering the second half of November, winter is just around the corner. What will the next 3 months look like in Pennsylvania in terms of temperature, precipitation, and snowfall? For a discussion and our official Weather World winter outlook, I'm joined by our own John Nese and Kyle Imhoff, the Pennsylvania State Climatologist. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Rob, good to see you.
Kyle, let's start with you. It's safe to say that last winter was not typical for PA.
No, it was not. It was very mild across the entirety of the state. Most reporting stations were between their top 10 or top 20 warmest winters on record. And what we look at is we compare to our climate normal. So for the meteorological winter season, December 1st through February 28th, if we look at high temperatures across the state, the northern half of the state generally in the 30s. Once you head down into southeastern Pennsylvania, the average high temperature for the meteorological winter season is in the 40s, low to mid 40s. When we look at low temperatures, the northern half of the state generally in the teens for lows, and then once you head into southern and eastern Pennsylvania, you're into the 20s, low to mid 20s for the meteorological season. When we look at snowfall for the season, which is what most people are interested in when they think about the winter season, you can see that there's a wide range of snowfall amounts that happen during the course of the winter season. So the northwest snow belt, where a lot of lake effect snow occurs when you're closer to bodies of water and higher terrain, upwards of 90, 100, 110 inches of snow is not atypical in a winter season. Then when you head into southern eastern Pennsylvania, it's down in the 10, 20, 30-inch snowfall range for the entirety of the meteorological winter season.
Good to have that data in mind as we make this year's forecast. And looking ahead to this winter, a good place to start is always the Equatorial Pacific. Research has shown that sea surface temperature anomalies right here can have far-reaching impacts and some degree of predictability in the mid-latitudes. So when waters in the central and eastern Equatorial Pacific are significantly warmer than average, we call this an El Nino. When they're far enough below average, we call it a La Nina. As you can see by the dark blue in this area, temps right now are several degrees below average, indicating a La Nina pattern. And historically, when there's a La Nina, there are certain characteristics that tend to show up in different places around the globe. So the blue extending from southern Alaska into the Pacific Northwest show cooler than average conditions typically favored in a winter season. Meanwhile, the brown in the southern US indicates where warm and drier conditions are usually more pronounced in the winter season during a La Nina pattern. We can also use analogs to dig deeper into what this means for PA, right, John?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And you know, because La Nina and El Nino involve ocean temperature, which doesn't change that quickly, the computer models are actually pretty good at predicting La Nina and El Nino months in advance. So we are going to try to exploit that a little more in depth. Now, here's a plot from NOAA summarizing about a dozen models. And this shows the ocean temperature anomaly in the Equatorial Pacific where we track El Nino and La Nina. Now, the red line is average. Below that is cooler than average. The black line shows what's happened to this point. And once the black line is surrounded by the gray shading, those are forecasts through the winter and spring, and they are well below the blue line, which is the La Nina threshold here, far enough below that there's really good confidence of a moderate to strong La Nina this winter. So let's do some of that analog forecasting like we do on long shots. We're going to look back at previous winters when a strong La Nina occurred to see how those winters turned out in the US. Here's a composite of temperature anomalies in 7 previous winters with a strong La Nina. Now, the reds and oranges and tans here indicate a tendency for a warmer than average winter, and blue and green a tendency towards colder than average. And here in Pennsylvania, we're on the edge of the warmer than average tendency. Though I did check the daily data during the 7 winters that are used here, there were some really cold but short stretches during those winters. So although they trended warm, winter still got its shots in. Now let's switch over to precipitation. Here's a composite of precipitation anomalies in those 7 La Nina winters. Here, the red, orange, and tan mean a tendency for a drier than average winter. Green and blue, tendency for a wetter than average winter. Pennsylvania has a little green and blue in the west, but some tan sneaking into the east. So it's kind of a mixed signal, certainly not trending strongly one way or the other. Now, Kyle's going to take a look at some of the other analogs we might use for this winter.
Yeah, that's right, John. So another major weather headline from this year was the very active hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. So looking back through the past of years where we had a very active hurricane season in the Atlantic, in addition to the fact that we've had late season major hurricanes this year, we had hurricanes Eta and Iota. So that was another thing that we looked at when we looked at these similar years in the past. And looking at the imagery here, the yellows, oranges, and reds indicate temperatures above normal. The blues indicate below normal temperatures. And you can see that much of the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. in those years were with a very active hurricane season were warmer than normal in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. and then cold out west. When we look at precipitation, if you focus on Pennsylvania and the Ohio River Valley, western Pennsylvania slightly above normal for precipitation and then drier than normal, again, slightly drier than normal in eastern Pennsylvania. Another major headline from this year was just how dry it was, especially in central and northern Pennsylvania. So looking at the U.S. Drought Monitor that keeps tabs on just how dry different regions of the country are, I looked at years in the past when summers, more than a quarter of the state was in a moderate to exceptional drought status, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor product. So in those years when at least a quarter of the state was in those categories during the summer season, again, you can see that for temperatures, warmer than normal across the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. When we shift over to precipitation, again, wet in northern and western Pennsylvania, similar to the other analog for the hurricane season, and drier than normal conditions as you head toward the eastern seaboard.
Well, thanks for a look at those analogs, John and Kyle. With all of that discussion and more about La Nina in mind, here is our 2020-2021 Weather World Winter Outlook. The overall theme is more of the mild for December, January, and February. In terms of temperature, we expect it to be above average once again, but not as warm as last winter. We think two-thirds of the days will be warmer than the long-term mean. Our confidence is higher, at least in a mild December. That goes with our agreement with our most recent Climate Watch forecast. But just because we'll be above average overall doesn't mean we won't see some cold snaps. Like John said, several La Ninas have featured some shots of intense chill. It's just not long lasting. For precipitation, it should be close to average statewide. If the odds are favoring a split decision, if it's likely to be above average anywhere, it would be in western PA. And for snowfall, we'll keep with the trends of recent winters and our forecast for above average temperatures when we say we expect it to be once again below average for snowfall. I'll admittedly say, gentlemen, that I'm still hoping for at least a few good snowstorms.
Well, I wouldn't mind if the rain snow line was between you and me, Rob. I would rather see the wet than shovel the white.
I love snowstorms, so I'm with you, Rob.
All right. Well, John, Nese, and Kyle Imhoff, thanks so much for the great discussion tonight. And we will be back in just a moment with more.